Mahalo day to all the viewers around the world. Welcome to this another Polynesianized podcast. On this episode, I am Mr. Aotearoa, coming straight from Aotearoa, South Auckland, Manurewa. I hope you guys are all doing well. We are live on YouTube, um, also Facebook and X and Instagram, coming live to all these platforms that you can join us on this episode. Tua, how's everything going on your side of the world, man?
Yes, Masi, the entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, is still with us. We haven't been removed for our nickname, Sin City, by the man upstairs. So we're excited to be here and to join, and really looking forward to the episode today. This guest
Nice.
we've been coordinating. She's been a very busy
Yep.
lady, doing a lot of different activities, whether it's media, also arts, and then also the academy she runs. But we're really excited for her to join us. And before we bring her up on stage, just going to give our viewers will notice in today's episode, we're trying out new things. This is going to be an episode of trying out a few different formats as we
Let's
try to
go.
get better. We're always trying to improve. One of the things we're going to do better at is our introduction to our guest. So on today's podcast, we are honored to welcome a true living treasure from the heart of Tonga, our guest, Losalio Milika Pusiaki-Fifita, known to many simply as Milika, born and raised in Lapaha, Mua Tonga Tapu, the historic capital of Tonga. Because of the Tui Tonga, Milika comes from a renowned Punake lineage, the great-granddaughter of the legendary Viri Pusiaki and granddaughter of Tuila Pusiaki, a master Punake choreographer, composer, and performer. She is the founder of the Feunukola Global Academy of Tongan Arts, Dance, and Culture. Milika carries the oral traditions, genealogies, and performing arts of the Tui Tonga era with grace and authority. Her work bridges the living voice of our ancestors and with today's generation, both in Tonga and across the diaspora. We're going to go ahead and bring her on stage. Milika Maloelere, and welcome to the Polynesianized podcast. We're really grateful to have you here.
Malo pito tualau en tomasi malo atu he whainga malie. Pe kokole pe ke ukapa atu he vai o matoka. Talangata ia te au o whai ki tua. Ka tā mōka whainga malie ko ni ke whai hawakuaka. Moha manatu melie ki he kolo tupu anga. Mo ki fumaka na whai ai hoku na moa ai taulanga ko where mei.
Malo pito Milika.
Mahalo.
That was beautiful. Really appreciate it. And how are things going on? You've been really busy. We've been trying to coordinate schedules. What have you been up to, lady? Kind of just share with us what has been keeping you busy.
Oh man, I count my blessings. You know, our ancestors has been doing the hard work, and here I am, the carrier of the legacies. So here in Aotearoa, Tamaki Makaro with Brother Tomasi, you've been very busy since January, teaching the Faiva for the ASP Polyfest just gone, and then the Pacifica Festival is the programmer for the Tongan village. A few acting roles here and there, and still teaching individuals from near and far. We do run classes online as well. So yes, they have been very full on for me.
Wow, that is a very full schedule.
I don't know.
Did you always know you wanted to get into acting, and how did you get into that? Before we kind of go through some of what we have, but how did that happen? How did that acting opportunities come for you?
Well, my first role was a cultural advisor. So I would be invited to go in for the filming of Tongan movies, the likes of the Legend of Baron Doa, the Brutal Lives, So I was
Yes.
the cultural advisor, make sure that it's, aligned with our cultural values. But then, a Polynesian or Tongan movies, they sometimes need extras. And then they just realized that I have this personality. So I was the crazy aunt one time. And then from there, I was sick nana. And yeah, so I think it's in our DNA, being a dancer and an actor at the same time. So yeah, so from a cultural advisor to now playing roles that align with my skills and knowledge.
What's the most recent? I've seen it online, whether it's from social media or on YouTube, just kind of some advertising. The most recent role that you've been a part of.
I played a sick grandma, Tongan grandma, on a short film called Firstborn, and has been awarded the audience award in Philadelphia, and now in Sweden. It's part of their film festival. So I was playing a nana from Lapaha. The producer is a girl from Lapaha and Vava'u. She wrote about her relationship with her grandma, but unfortunately she was diagnosed with cancer. So I went in to play her grandma, and it was exciting. And recently I was an indigenous knowledge holder for a documentary. I think it was launched yesterday or the other day. It was called 400 Weddings and a Funeral. So I was there to explain about how we Tongans, took responsibilities on weddings and funerals.
That's the one, Mr. Aotearoa, you said you just saw recently.
Last night. Yeah. Yes, last night. Premiered last night. So it's awesome.
No, that's pretty cool. We're really excited to have you, especially to discuss the dance, your experience growing up in Lapaha, and then the historical context, and just sharing your thoughts, your experience. It's really great to hear all the projects and the opportunities you're working through. Those are always fun and exciting. We did prepare a deck to kind of walk through, just to be a guiding post. We'll go wherever the conversation goes, wherever the Talanoa decides to go, and we are a big believer wherever the ancestors inspire us to go. And I think you said something really important. I really believe in it, Milika. The ancestors did do a lot of the hard work, and many of the sweet things in life we have is because what of the ancestors did. And one of the best ways we can honor them is to carry those blessings and those opportunities in the best way we can. We're never going to be perfect. We'll make mistakes, but I think they appreciate when we do the best we can to carry that legacy and that memory forward. Masi, anything before we pull up the first slide and just kind of jumpstart the conversation?
No, let's get into the slides.
Sweet. Go ahead.
True. To allow. When I came to New Zealand in 1996, I finished from Takuilau College. So I just finished Form 6 in Takuilau College. But when I came, I never went to further my studies. I just did all the practical works here, being a Punake. Grandpa, my late grandpa Tuila was still alive. But in 2021, I got accepted to a master degree of applied indigenous knowledge, solely based on my practical work. So normally you would have to do a diploma or a certificate, but they just looked at my work and know the history of my ancestors and accepted me. And in probably 2020, I can't really know, but 2022 or just after COVID, I had my master in applied indigenous knowledge level 9. And I'm just saying, it's to agree with you that our ancestors have been playing a big part on our journeys. And here we are, the three of us and all of us who are the carriers of the legacies.
I'm really glad you shared that, Milika. And this is how the conversation goes, right? We have comments and discussions and then questions pop up. Can you share kind of like your grandfather, your father, the history behind your family and how long and how they've been integrated in the arts and in Lapaha and in the roles that your family has been in that role and in the ancient capital.
Iyo malo Alpito. Let me just start with myself. I was born in 1972 in Tonga and raised in Lapaha, the ancient capital and the sacred heartland of Tonga. I am the eldest Mokopuna of Swane Ngutukoula Tatuila Pusiaki and the great granddaughter of the late Willie Pusiaki. Now, my great-grandfather, Willie Pusiaki, was renowned as the sound artist behind many of the compositions of the late Queen Charlotte Tupou III, dedicated to Lapaha. That reflected Her Majesty's deep ancestral connection through her beloved mother, the Queen Lavinia Veiongo, to the Tui Tonga lineage. Now, through my genealogy, Willie Pusiaki was a direct descendant of Laufili Tonga, the 39th and last Tui Tonga. Laufili Tonga's eldest son was Manu Mataongo Lutoviko, whose eldest daughter was Nanasi Pau'u. And Nanasi Pau'u had 4 children. The first one was a girl, Moli Tahisi. The second one was Sepiuta, Tauki Onetuku, Fusipala Akilele. And the third one was Willie Pusiaki. And the last one was Sakalia. So, Sepiuta, Tauki Onetuku, Fusipala Akilele married the late Malukava Fineasi, the esteemed Punake credited with creating and formalizing the Laka dance tradition in Tonga. Sepiuta was the daughter of Maria Anaukihesina Farepapalangi, who was herself the daughter of Williami Ungama Papalangi, the son of Seasi Tuku Aho, continuing a rich lineage deeply woven into the cultural, artistic, and chiefly history of Tonga. So that's where, all the talented and the creation of the Faiva. I've heard from Grandpa and all the Kaumata Pule or the Falefa that before it was called Faiva in Lapaha, it was only called Whakame'ite. The word Faiva was created when they wanted to build the monuments, the terrace tombs in Lapaha, because they know that their empire will not be forever, but they want to build something that will stand forever as memory of their might and their greatness. So they started creating the Faiva. So the word Faiva means Fa'iva, or the 4 relationships between the Punake, the dancers, the singers, and the one from the Taumua or the audience. So that's the 4 roles, and that's what Faiva means, Fa'iva. Prior to that, it was only called Whakame'ite, which generally means you're just going there as a commoner or of lower rank to entertain your king or your nobility or the higher ups. But Faiva was created and composed so that they could travel to Futuna and Uvea and exchange and get those limestones and all those rocks to build the monuments that we all see as the Otulangi or Lapaha.
Fascinating. Any comments or question there, Masi, before I have a couple that pop up?
No, I like how Milika distinguished the Faiva and the Whakame'ite, because those are the 2 common words when you go to celebrations that they use when they introduce Taolunga or Faiva kind of thing. So I love how you broke that down, Milika.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And going along with that, Milika, one of the things that we discuss quite a bit on the podcast is how important monuments are, right? And you shared that the ancestors, they understood that nothing stays the same forever. Things are always changing, always evolving, but you try to institute, whether it's a monument, a physical representation of the level of success, but you also mentioned like the term Faiva and really how it's talking about relationships of these different groups. That when I hear things like that, those are the things that provide a civilization stability, right? Because you're developing a cultural process by which you celebrate great achievements. You're celebrating the relationships amongst the people. When with your great grandfather and all your ancestors, it seems like they understood the significant role that the arts of dance and singing had an important role in keeping the community and the culture, not just to preserve it, but those relationships to be strong and to be maintained. What were some of the stories that you would hear from those you learned from on why Faiva was so important to the culture? Does that make sense, the question?
Yes. So like I said, they formed Faiva. I think it started from the 6th Tui Tonga, Ma'uhau, and Apuanea, 6th and 7th. They decided just to start planning for it because they all know that, like today, they no longer exist. And so they formed these roles. So Punake, and it was very active back in the days. You have to be anointed. You can't just get up from your bed and decide to be a Punake. You have to be anointed by the Ho'eiki, or by His Majesty himself. Back in the olden days, Malukava was an anointed master poet, and so was Milika Pusiaki and other Punakes across Tonga. The role of the Punake is someone who can compose, who can choreograph, and who can put music into his own composition. And if you can't do that, then you are not a Punake. Some people can only choreograph but cannot compose and cannot put sound into a composition. They are not called Punake. So, for example, Tomasi, if you bring one of if to allow is a composer and you want to choreograph it, I will not call you a Punake because the composition belongs to allow. I will only call you a Pulotu haka, a choreographer in English. Until you can compose your own and choreograph and put tune into it, you are then called a master poet. But the time you use other people's composition, you are only labeled as a Pulotu haka. It also happens if you can only compose but cannot choreograph, you are a Pulotu fa'u. And if you can only produce music and cannot do the other two, then you are a Pulotu fasi. So, but those are the roles that were created back in the olden days, and they had the Punake as the master poet and the lead in this project called Faiva, and they taught the Faha'yula. Faha'yula was the first Tongan traditional dance for the young maidens. With the purpose of going over to a foreign country to show, because we didn't have gold or money or anything of that value in the olden days, so they decided to teach up. They would pick the most beautiful girls across Tonga to come and form this group so that they learned the Faha'yula and then travel with them. And the second item that they taught was the Otuhaka. Otuhaka was the old, it contains old terminologies that even these days most of us don't understand the meaning of those terminologies in the verses of the Otuhaka. And they formed this group and they went to Uvea and Futuna, but when they were traveling, something happened at sea and they prayed to the gods. So in the Metu'u Paki, on the first line, it says, Ko lulue, ko lulue, Ko lulue suamai mate. Ko lulu is the god of the ocean. And they were praying to Ko lulu to save them from the storm that hit them while at sea. That's why it is preserved in the Metu'u Paki by the Lapaha people. So suamai is an old terminology, help, meaning help. Help me, we are going to die. Then suamai mate. So while they were at sea, and then the second verse talked about Latu, the god of the wind. They were just praying to God. So, and they landed in Uvea, and that's where they formed the Metu'u Paki. And I think to this day, the Uvean and the Futunan people are also performing Metu'u Paki. But Metu'u Paki is simply a prayerful chant to the ancient gods by the voyagers before they travel to sea or venture out to sea, or while if they were hit by a storm or some natural disaster while at sea, they would use that. So when they went to Uvean Futuna, they got the stones and they came back. This was the time when Tonga was Tonga's empire was across the Pacific. That's what I heard
Very
from
yeah.
from the Lapaha people.
There's been so many questions. First one, you mentioned the term Pulotu Haka, right? And
Pulotu
from you, Pulotu from what you understand, what is the term Pulotu and where does it come from? Is there anything you can share there? And then the other one is, what do you know or understand of that original ula that you said? What's the name of the dance, the traditional? That's the Fahaiula. Like anything you know, what kind of the movements were, or any kind of understanding of that dance, because I had never heard of that, Milika, until I watched a video where I had heard that there were traditional dances, but I never heard the name of it. So I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts on what is Pulotu and what this traditional dance looked like, and why we don't have it anymore.
Thank you. Well, Pulotu is the underworld. So what I heard from our ancestors and what I heard in Lapaha, the commoners had no spirits. So if you were a commoner, when you die, you're gone. You have it's only the Ho'eki or the nobilities and the royal families that would have spirits. So when they die, their spirits would go to Pulotu. And then if you were a good person, your spirit will go to Pulotu Haka Haka. Haka Haka means you're happy, and that's probably the same with heaven as we believe today. So, Haka Haka means joyful, and when the baby, is happy, like throwing his or her arms in the air. And if you were a bad person, talking about the nobility and the royal family, your spirit will go to Pulotu Aka Aka. And Aka Aka is the unsettled spirit. You did bad stuff and you're not satisfied. You're not happy. So you go to the darker side of Pulotu, which is Pulotu Aka Aka. And Aka Aka, when you were a boy or when you were young, if you disagree with what man says, you would Aka Aka and, not satisfied. So those are the two worlds, the two underworlds. I always told some people who would come and ask me, yes, I think Haka Haka is the happy spirit world, similar to heaven, and the other one is hell. It's the,
Very interesting.
So that's where it came from. And then I was told that the Punake, that's why they are so different from the normal people, because a Punake would often be teleported to a higher realm where he or she, but back in the olden days was mainly men who were Punakes, talking about Malukava and really Pusiaki in that era. They would be teleported to a higher realm where they could be able to compose or unpack metaphor. Unpack metaphors like the Shakespeare world. When the composition talks about a rose, but that's its literal meaning. Apparently, there's a meaning behind that, and that's a metaphor. A rose could be a ofa'anga, a loved one, or a rose could refer to a child or a tapo'o. So I was told that the Punake or the Pulotu people, the Punake came from Pulotu Haka Haka, because in that world, that's where the Faiva, the word Haka on the Faiva, Haka Haka, that it comes from Pulotu, that happy world underground. And when they come, they have this special talent that they are able to unpack the metaphor in our composition and put the actions into it, and not reading its literal meaning, but going to understand what's behind the literal meaning. It's the heliaki, we call it heliaki. So I was told that's where but you have to work on stages. You become a Pulotu Haka first, and Pulotu Fa'u, Pulotu Hiva, before you become a master poet or Punake Kakato. But that's to answer your question briefly. Yeah.
So it's almost like, is it I'm just thinking out loud. I come up with ideas that sometimes are wrong all the time. But it seems like you're saying that, like Pulotu Haka, in a way, is you're elevated to be inspired to come with these beautiful things. In ancient, like European context, beauty is something that you're inspired. It's not something that exists in the normal plane. You have to be inspired to bring beauty because we don't know what beauty is. And when I hear the name and your description, when you say, a Pulotu Haka, it's like you have to be inspired to go into Pulotu to bring down, like you said, these beautiful things that you don't just come across in the world that you're in right now. So it's kind of interesting to hear the names and the experience, and that the term Punake, though I did hear when I was growing up in Tonga, I'm starting to understand in this conversation, it is much rarer a title than people think it is. I think people, well, at least for when I grew up, it's like, oh, Punake, oh, it's a poet. It's someone who makes song. But it seems to be much deeper than that. It is, yes, they do poetry, they do hand choreography, right? They write the music or add the music to it. But it really is about inspiring something beautiful and infusing the culture into that. And it's not something that is easy to achieve.
That's right. And I remembered when I grew up hearing my uncles and my auntie would always talk about Milika Pusiaki and Malukawa. They would prefer to isolate themselves and would sit near the beach and look out at the space and would hear the waves and all the twittering of the birds, and that what brings them or being elevated to that higher realm that I talked about, and it just opened up that portal where the creative juice comes flowing, and then they were able to write or hum a tune or just start to unpack a composition, and then when they come back, when they are ready, they would come back and it's all there, and they just pass it on to their Pulotu Haka people who would help them remember or help them keep the choreography or the tune. But they were always seen that they would isolate themselves. As for Milika Pusiaki, my maternal grandmother would tell me that he would say, I'm going now to my room. I don't need anybody to disturb me. And he would have a tin plate and a fork, and he would hit it and then put it into his ear, and that's how he would get the sound that he would use for sound, as a sound artist. So it's very interesting, even to this day, for myself to still think about how, well, these days people go and earn a bachelor of music or, in the Palangi world. But our ancestors did it the natural way, the connection with Mother Nature and the calling, they call it a calling. They call them a mau or tonga fisi. It just happened naturally. And not everybody were able to do that back in the days.
Fascinating. Very spiritual experience from what it sounds like. This is not just something that just happens on its own. It's very thoughtful. It's very spiritual in its context. Before I follow back up on the ula, what I've heard this a lot, but kind of give the context of the idea of the singing from Lapaha that's called the lomi peau. Like, what is that, and what is that style, whatever you want to call it? Kind of share where that type of, Lapaha and these places are known for those things. But can you share what is the lomi peau and how that fits into the history and music and the cultural arts?
Yes. So thank you, Tola. Like I said in my introduction, that the late Queen Salote's mother, Queen Lavinia, has a connection to the Tui Tonga line. And so all the compositions by the Queen Salote to Lapaha, she named the group Lomi Peau, which is our ancestors, to be the legal custodian of that specific composition and to preserve it. And because Milika Pusiaki is a close relative of the queen, she used him as the sound artist. But the word Lomi Peau, going back in history, is the very big waka, a huge
Mhm.
waka. It was built in Uvea. Was built in. This is the time when Tonga's empire was the Pacific, and Uvea and Futuna was part of it, and there was a residence there for the Tui Tonga. And I was told the story. I was told that one day the king of Tonga's son was very little, and he came to the beach. The Uven men were building a boat, and the little boy just came and ran around and disturbed them. So one of the Uven men smacked him, and because he was disturbing their work. So
Mm.
he cried, and he ran to the king and told him that some people smacked him. So the king was very furious, but instead of going to address the issue, he went with his anger deep into the forest of Uvea and built a boat for his son. And then when his anger was gone, he realized that the big ship is in the middle of the land. How can he get it out to sea? It was said it was a very huge waka. And that's where the Lomi Bea word comes from. I'll say to you in Tongan, when I'm angry, I don't come and say to you and what do you call it in English? But I hold it. Lomi Bea wow. Huh? So I
Mm.
instead of coming and say, Tola, why did you do this? Blah blah blah. No, the king
Mm.
was angry, so he kept it to himself, put his anger into action, build a boat. His anger was gone. There's a boat, and that's the Lomi Beo style. So when you're angry at people, you don't go and blah blah blah. You let your work
Mm.
speak for itself. If
Mm.
you wanna fight with people, fight with your work. Now Lomi Beo, the king uh, press it down on him. Lomi pe ea wow through my work. And then when the anger is gone, there's a big boat for his son. And when at the time he didn't know what to
Fascinating.
do, so he prayed to the Fijian god Naila Sikau. And Naila Sikau appeared and did some magical thing, and the Waka went down to sea. And up to this day, there's a river there in the history of
Okay.
Uvea. Yeah. So that's where the Lomi Peao came from, and that's what I heard from when I grew up in Lapaha. And then they called the group in Lapaha Lomi Peao. And it always happened, the word Whakalotomua goes with Lomi Peao. It's something that I want to talk about. That's how Whakalotomua means. Whakalotomua is
Mm.
that you don't go fighting with words. You let your work speak. You just
For
work
Mm.
itself.
quietly and let your work talk speaks to itself.
Mhm.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting because that is, it's discussed. The greatest person you need to conquer is yourself, right?
Mhm.
That's a big, and that's what you're kind of sharing there is, and that's one of the things that I think is very useful for us today. Leadership and power and responsibility is, it comes with a price, and that price is that sacrifice of self-control, where we've had this conversation, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, Milika. We've mentioned this. One of the things I've really enjoyed about what we do on the podcast is sometimes we discuss the history and we discuss things, and then all of a sudden an idea pops up. And it's like, this is something I've never considered. But, and this has to do with your ancestor of Laufidi Tonga. There is a lot of discussion that the traditional perspective on Laufidi Tonga was he was defeated. He was kind of in many ways irrelevant, and we love and we appreciate Tupou the First. We recognize all the great things that he did, but one of the things that came from some of our discussions is it became apparent that Laufidi Tonga did something from what I can see is a Lomi Peao kind of situation where, as the Tui Tonga, because of his authority and his position and the long thousands of years of leadership, he could have taken a position that was very like the Tui Tonga, where he just got angry, like the story you shared. The kid gets smacked. The natural reaction is, let's go punish the guy who's causing the issue. But instead, you stop, you think, you practice self-control, and you think about what is best for the bigger group. And many times that means sacrificing yourself to produce something that is beyond what anyone could have imagined. But it takes a certain level of humility, certain level of sacrifice. And when I hear and pay attention to, what we hear from our ancestors is how Laufiri Tonga provided Taufa'ahau, the Taumafakava, when he sent the Wharewa to set up the Taumafakava for Tupou the first. All of a sudden, it just crossed my mind. It's like, this guy is doing what you shared in that story of that Lomi Piau, because he said, the Tui Tonga is going to end with me. And that's already a big sacrifice, right? Because he could have fought back, but it almost appears that he knew, if I fight back, that would help the Western powers. You have an excuse to colonize Tonga. And it's almost like he understood, we have to keep the country together. He had identified someone who has talent, someone who was willing, he was willing to be able to carry what was most important, not just for the nobility, but for all the country. And he enables him to be power to lead Tonga into where we are today. And I was like, how come we never talk about this? I grew up in Tonga, went to elementary, went to high school, sit around talking with people. And then just from conversations on the podcast, you start to realize this is not a small thing that Laufiri Tonga did. And that a lot of people, they don't appreciate that. And that's why sometimes I tell Masi, sometimes we have these conversations and I feel like our ancestors put ideas in our minds and they want us to tell everyone and share with people, hey, we did great things and we gave great things to all of Tonga, and it gets forgotten. But any thoughts on that, Milika? Any thoughts on that? What you heard about Laufiri Tonga, what he did, just to kind of share that, because what we were taught in Tonga was Tupou the First did all these things, and we're not trying to say we aren't grateful to Tupou the First. We're extremely grateful, and we're extremely grateful for the royal family today and the great heritage that they have. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts on any of that, Milika. Anything you're willing to share or feel or you think is important to share about that.
Yes, I agree with the Lomi Peao style that the Laufili Tonga portrayed during the last time of his in the throne, in authority, by the Catholic missionaries who came straight to Lapaha. That is why he's buried on the top of the Catholic Malae in Lapaha, Laufili Tonga. I heard that Tupou the First stole his wife. So
yes,
instead of him coming to revenge, he just gave up knowing. Yes, this is true love. I don't want to fight for the woman that so what I've heard, that Tupou the First stole Laufili Tonga's wife. And it was said that he said it to, his close-knit people of Lapaha, of Kauhala Uta, that this is the Lomi Peao true love. Often a hero, the true hero, you don't attack, you don't go revenge. You pull back, you give the happiness that she wants to her, and that's true love. and then all you do is go quiet, and they will know it. You know, he doesn't care about the world and what the world think and what the world dictates or comment about. All he cared about was to show his wife that he still loved her, and then this is what is to give up and end that lineage and give the authority to both the first, who he knows would, you know, would run the country well, as we all know up to today.
Fascinating. Appreciate that. Any comments or thoughts, Masi? And then I want to go back to Milika to give us an understanding of the ula, the traditional dance.
No, let's go into that. No, let's go into that one.
Give a discussion and kind of describe what you understand about that very traditional old dance and its relationship to the Tau'olunga today, Milika. If you could kind of give that context and help us understand that history.
Right, yes. So before the missionaries hit our shores, we had the whakame'ite, as I was talking about before. And the commoners will create their own Faiva, own own haka and movements that will tend to entertain the ho'eki, and the higher ups in that time. And some were called liku. Some of the dances were called me'ela. There was ula and there was paha'i ula.
Okay. Okay.
So the ula was more like the hula in Hawaii or in Tahiti and other places. It was very free and seductive at times, but I'm talking about prior to Christianity hit our shores. So there was that's why it was called whakame'ite. The word me'ite means to please, to please. And the purpose of those dances was simply to please the king of Tonga and his men. And there's another one called liku and me'laufola. But Faha'iula is more like the accompanied dancers of the ula dancer. It's like the backup dancers. That's why it's called Faha'i. Faha'i means Faha'i hema, left side. Faha'i mata'u, right side. And when you see them coming in, they are not the main dancers. They are the backup dancers of the main lady who would then perform in the middle. Then she's the ula girl. That was what happened before Christianity. And the accompanied dancers come, they are of lower rank, they are ho'eki. See, they are not a big ho'eki girl. And then the main girl will come in the middle. She's the one of the highest status. And they would, do this move. But then when the Christianity came, they banned this one. They look at all the dances and whatever that doesn't align with Christianity, with Christian beliefs, they told the people to ban it. But the people of Lapaha, they would just continue on and instead make it Christian-like, but still continue on the traditional dances. So Tau'olunga the Faha'iula was then turned into a Tau'olunga. The Faha'iula is now called the Tau'olunga Tokolahi, the group dance. So they turned the Faha'iula that the missionaries banned into a Tau'olunga Tokolahi. And then Taula, because the movement of Taula was, they find it very exotic, so they didn't want it to continue. But then the Lapaha people turned it into a solo dance. And it's so different from, the Samoan Siva, because they se'e, they glide. The Tongan dances remain still just to show respect.
Very composed, yes.
Yeah, very composed. And they were not allowed to move their lower part of the body when they perform. They were only, that's why it's called Tau'olunga. It's only the upper part. And this comes from the idea of the Tongan fale. The lock, the va'akau that lies across on the fale is called Tau'olunga or Taufatunga motua. The Tau'olunga comes from there because the kahoki or those little sticks are tied into it. The idea is to take how we teach our girls to remain pure until their wedding day. So the idea of the Tau'olunga is to teach our young maidens to remain pure until their wedding day. So all the values of a girl, that's the beams,
Mm.
uh,
It's the beam.
the
Yeah, it's the
closing to the
structural
yeah.
beam.
So
It's the
the
weight
structure.
bearing
So
beam.
yeah, I'm just trying to. So that's why they form a Tongan Taolunga, is to bring that all the values of a Tongan Tahine and teach her the values by us, by dance choreographers, so that she knows why she wear the puleoto, why the oil is still glowing and flowing. Why the brother is the tula fale. So that's those are the values of a Tongan Tahine in our Tongan family hierarchy. So that's why I always
Mm.
say it's not a Samoan Taulunga. We have our own, we have this structure that was taken from Tafale Tonga, preserve the values of a woman by teaching her all these values during her performances.
Fascinating. Quick question: because you're out there and you've got your masters, really from the body of work that you've done, you're interacting with a lot of people in that space. This is something we see quite a bit, Milika. There are ideas that are well accepted, and people just think is the history, but it's not, like you shared. Like, oh, the Tawalunga comes from Samoa, and it's a Samoan structure and thinking behind it, and it gets established. Why do you think these ideas are they get spread quicker, and these ideas get into what people think is the truth? Why does that happen?
Okay, two things. When I grew up, and I think if you would ask the other uncles, Sakalia or Unga or Devita Pale, in Lapaha, we were told to keep our whakaloto mua with us. When we go out to teach, you can just do the technicality of it. 1, 2, 3. Don't give it all away. So the
Mm.
whakaloto mua. So when Grandpa went to teach at Atenisi or go to other villages or other parts, he didn't really take the whakaloto mua fully and give it away. He would twist it a little, but keep the whakaloto mua style within our family and within the village, just to perform for the whole eki, which is the sole purpose of the Lomi Beao, is just to entertain and attend to the superiors. And that's why there's a lot of new other models out there. I heard it with my own ears when the late Kalaniwalu Tutulu was alive. He said that to the Lomi Bell singers, when you go out, remember, keep the whakaloto mua here. Don't keep, don't teach other people fully with our gold treasure, our taonga, our treasures. So that's why I think back in the day, so
Mm.
they would just do that, and then people from other villages or other islands will, because I know Tuila and them went to Fiji, but in Malukava they went to teach in Wava'u and Hapai and other groups. And the other thing is about the Tawalunga Whakaha'amoa or the Samoan dance, Tataka Motonga. There was a api, there was a home that was called the Takamotonga in Moa. And that
Hmm.
was the place for the Samoan who came to visit Limapo, because Limapo is a Samoan that married one of the Tongan king. So
Mm.
they are the ones who brought the Samoan Tawolunga to Tonga. The word Takamotonga, one day their kids came to play with the Tongan kids and they cried. They ran to their parents and their parents said, "Ko me ai na tala tuai ke tuku ai tataka moi Tonga." That's why we tell you not to go mix with the Tongans. They will hit you and you will cry. That's the meaning of the word tataka motonga. So stop go mixing or mingling with the Tongans. They will end up, smack you or hit you or whatever. But I saw the difference with the Taulunga from Lapaha. It's very strict. It's very, we call it, what's the word? Whakaeiki, graceful.
Mm.
Mm.
The
Mm.
Taulunga from the Takamotonga is the modern one. It's more like, and it was mainly used for floor show type. Because when I work
Entertainment.
at the Tongan Cultural Center, the late Tuyalo Kefu taught us the differences. He said that the Tawalunga for the floor show is to entertain the tourists. And because the tourist doesn't understand the words, the meaning of the song, Tuyalo tried to make it more entertained by the moves. Whereas the Taolunga from Lapaha, it was never for entertainment of visitors or foreigners. It was simply to go to Pangailahi or to the palace or to the Ho'eki. And there are a huge difference to allow. So with the Lapaha one, you are not allowed to tap your vae. That shows disrespect in front of your superiors or in front of a princess. You can't, you have to humble yourself. You only portray the meaning of the composition by your movements, but not so much, loud busy and that, because you are of a lower rank. And you all know, in the presence of a superior, we are just there not to show off ourselves, but just humble ourselves. Whereas the Takamotonga ones more like the Samoan Siva, they say it, they glide, they become very entertaining. It's the Samoan style that was adopted in the Takamotonga. And we see
Very
that a lot in
interesting.
floor shows, but not in traditional dances to traditional events.
Wow. Really, really appreciate that. Masi, anything? We haven't even gotten to the slide yet. Anything, Masi, to bring up?
No, it's just very very interesting, and it kind of goes with some of the oral history that I've kind of learned, and what Milika kind of talked about with the changing of names, especially when you're adapting to, modern Christian times of, how Milika, you mentioned with the Fahaiula, that's kind of changed the name to a Taolunga, which is right now to make it, because this is kind of, a lot of people don't know, there's a lot of politics too when you bring these changing and stuff, that you change it just to make things survive. And like you said, it's just entertainment. But there's certain groups, you mentioned, America, that we're still holding that koroa, that understanding of how it's really done. So very fascinating, Mirika.
Yeah. No, and it's what's really interesting about what you shared, Milika, is what the ancestors did to modernize or to make the Taolunga more palatable or acceptable in the Christian terms, but to put the culture and the meaning into it. When we went over the Piritaunga and the Tauma Fakava with Te Vitafale, those things are built into every part of the Tongan culture. Like the Tauma Fakava is a representation of the heavens, of how the stars move and its order, and it's basically bringing down the heavens, the order of the heavens, and representing it in how the government is, how the religion is, how society is structured. And so it's not a surprise that when you have a rich culture and history like that they can say, okay, we're Christian now, but we're going to take the same understanding, the same skills, and develop it into the Taolunga to represent the values that we think are important to preserve. This is something our ancestors have been doing for thousands and thousands of years. And it's fascinating to really hear that. We're gonna go through these slides, and really we're gonna kind of just focus on the question. And it's like there's these stuff in the background on the top that we can read, and for the viewers to kind of understand. And because we do an audio version, I'm just gonna read through the bullet points and then ask the question, Milika. Respond however you feel is appropriate. But you're from Lapaha, Mua, the ancient Tui Tonga capital, granddaughter of master poets and composers, founder of the Feunukola Global Academy, master Punake choreographer, actress, Heritage Artist Award winner from 2023. Milika, what was it like growing up in Lapaha? When you look back at growing up there, what made growing up in Lapaha different and unique from your perspective than anywhere else? Not just in Tonga, but in New Zealand, in overseas, because a lot of our listeners and viewers are born and raised in New Zealand, Australia, the United States. Just to kind of give them insight, what was it like to grow up in the ancient capital, to be amongst all the ruins, and just kind of share that perspective?
Yeah, growing up in Lapaha, I learned from a very young age, probably around 8 years old, that we lived within a deeply hierarchical society grounded in respect, duty, and cultural protocol. As the home of Kauhala Uta and the sacred history of the Tui Tonga lineage, Lapaha always carried a strong sense of molumalu, sacredness, a
Mm.
sacred and dignified what would you call it, atmosphere that you could truly feel growing up there. You know, my family home, Taulanga Felemei, stood beside the home of the late Aspeli Kupu, where nobles and members of the royal family would frequently visit. And because of that environment, our household was always active with responsibilities, preparation, obligations, as we and our ancestors tried to fulfill our duties and of service to those of higher rank. And like I said, you know, growing up in Lapaha also meant being raised with the values of our four golden pillars, our fa ikave gola fa. And that felt so differently when I come out of Lapaha and now residing here in Aotearoa since 1996. I missed it. I missed
Mm.
it because here, you know, you're pretty much the same with everyone else, and it's nice you get to learn about other cultures. But growing up in Lapaha, yeah, it was so sacred for me.
Yeah, it's fascinating because sometimes what we do on the podcast, Milika, is we look at studies, scientific studies. We talk about oral history. One of the studies that we looked at, they spent time to look at all the titles that were in Lapaha and Mua, which is Tatagamotonga, Lapaha, and Talasiu. And one of the observations that one of the academics said, the amount of titles in Lapaha was the most dense that they have seen anywhere in Polynesia. Meaning there were so many so many like titles and responsibilities of specialization that they said titles usually mean the more amount of titles in a smaller amount of space means the level of power is greater, right? The less power that's consolidated, you only have a few titles and responsibilities. But they noticed that in Lapaha, like you said, it's very a hierarchy. Everyone knows their role. Everyone knows how they interact with each other, and there's a very overrepresented amount of power in Lapaha than anywhere else. And it's a fascinating thing because it's everywhere, right? Whenever you have Ako Faiva and you have church, you have family meetings, everyone knows where they sit, what their role is. When there's a funeral on your mother's side, on your father's side, everyone understands the role. And there's not anyone out there saying, this is your job, this is your job. Everyone seems to just function
Fall in place.
and
Yeah.
work. And it's a beautiful thing to see. So totally understand and appreciate that comment. Anything else to share there? I'll bring up here and go to the next one if we don't have anything else. All right. This one is where we
Yeah, yeah,
start
we can
having some
continue.
more interesting here. It's going to get more exciting. The capital of the Polynesian world. We definitely believe that perspective, Milika. We heard that growing up in Tonga, that Lapaha had a very unique role, right? That Mu'a Lapaha was the seat of the Tui Tonga Empire, especially in Lapaha, but also it spread out to Tatagamotonga and to Talasiu, home of the Langi, right? The great royal tombs. Even Captain Cook wrote about Tonga's power across the Pacific and influence. What does Lapaha feel like to you as someone who grew up there? What makes from your experience talking about the 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 Tui Tonga's empire? What makes Lapaha unique from your perspective, whether from growing up there, from hearing of the oral history, or even part of your experience in teaching the arts? What makes Lapaha unique and different in regards to its role in the Polynesian empire, so to speak?
Io, Malopito. I felt Lapaha felt like the whole world, meaning everything was there for me. Every single person in Lapaha, like what you said, would knew where they stand because Lapaha has a system that everyone follows. For example, Takau Falefa or the Four Houses of Chiefs knew their roles and responsibilities. And if someone needs guidance for a funeral or cultural protocols, they would go and ask for guidance or even for permission. And dancing, they would know who to go to. They would come to my late grandfather. And yeah, it felt so different like that for me. And each roles were fulfilled by individuals that carries legacies from their ancestors. And there was no, what we call fehopokaki hesiakale, because they all know where they stand and what their roles and responsibilities. When I grew up, there were peace, uh, reciprocal respect, there was
Mm.
deep love, and there was patriotism in Lapaha when I grew up. It was so malu malu and sacred. Even when you go and climb in the Langi Terrace tombs, and you have to, at some point, have to wear a ta'ovala. I remember when one of my maternal aunts, Tuifua, took her best friend to Langi Tuoteau, and her best friend was from another village. When they reached the top of the tomb, probably 10 steps they climbed, her best friend was on the ground, shaking uncontrollably.
Hmm.
And we thought it was possessed by a spirit from Pulotu. But that's how sacred it was. It was so hard for people who are foreigners or strangers to Lapaha to come and freely walk around. So, but with this one, lucky Tuifua called Auntie Mele Maui, and she came to the rescue and she was healed. But this best friend of Auntie Tuifua never came back to Lapaha. That's what I meant. It's so hard to it's so hard to explain it. But you and I, all of you, you both and myself, growing up there, we know how it feels. Words cannot really describe how it felt.
Hmm.
Fascinating. You know, I think I just learned why I love Texas, Masi, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the feeling I get when I'm in Texas. Maybe Texas reminds me. It's funny because we're having this conversation. When you're in Texas and you go to certain places in Texas, maybe that's why it reminds me of home, and I feel so comfortable there. Texas, like you said, there's a lot of patriotism. They're proud. They're. You go to the Alamo, and everyone calls it the spirit of the Alamo. You go there, you feel the spirit of the sacrifice and the events that happen there, right? And then you have that feeling, and I don't like this conversation is helping me think like maybe that's why I really like Texas. Maybe Texas gives me the same feeling that I feel when I'm back home. Because like you mentioned, there's a certain energy, there's a certain feeling. I was sharing with my daughter about I had left Tonga and I'd been gone for maybe 10 years. And I came home and I was telling my daughter after the trip, I said, I had some very interesting experiences when I went back to Tonga. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, the first thing is when I ate the food, it was like the food when I ate it, it wasn't just like food. It was like an experience where it was like my body was like almost like saying, you're home. Like this is the stuff that makes you, right? I was eating ufi
Yeah.
and I was eating that and I was kind of blown away by the thoughts and the feelings I had because as weird as it sounds, it was like the ufi was talking to me and saying,
Mhm.
this is who you are and this is where you come from. Then, not to get overly strange, but I was sitting waiting for my brother. He went to go do something, and the house that I was in felt like it was full of people, but there was nobody there. You just feel the energy, you feel it, and you're like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel anything bad, but you could feel like hanggang now, just coming to say hi, and like they were saying, hey, we're excited to see you back, right? We know you can't see us, but I could feel them
Yeah.
in the room. And it's like you said, if you either understand it or you don't, and it's a very unique experience in that perspective. So I really do appreciate you sharing that, Mr. Aotearoa. Anything to share? Any thoughts, or we can go to the next one?
I think Milika kind of hits it right on the nail just regarding the patriotism. I mean, right? You especially when you grew up in Mua and then you go overseas and then you find out how you're a little bit more patriotic of Tonga, maybe compared to your friends. Because I went to school, people of Nuku'alofa and other places, but it's a little different when you grow up in Mua. And probably what you said is because we know we know who we are, we know the origin of Polynesia, and it carries a little deeper. And that's what I noticed, right? You don't really think about it too much, maybe when you're as a young kid and stuff, going down. But when you get overseas and you mingle with you mingle a lot more Tongans who are different that grow up in other islands and grow up in overseas most of their life, or just in different parts of Tonga Tapu. It's you find out it's a little different when you grow up in Mua. So I kind of felt what Merika said just regarding that. And yeah,
No,
that's
I
that's
I
definite.
appreciate that. All right, let's bring this back to the stage. So one of the we were very fortunate, Milika, to have David Burley on the podcast, and he just released a book. I mean, he spent what 30, 40 years doing archaeological studies. He did DNA studies, archaeological studies. Um, he really spent a lot of time in Tonga, but he also did work in Fiji and in other places. He took studies from throughout Polynesia and the Pacific, and he came out basically no no better way to say it. He said Tonga is where Polynesia came to be, right? And a lot of his work coming out of Nukuleka. Um, from your, you mentioned it a little bit in other areas. I won't read the slide itself, but it says, "What does the oral history that you grew up with and your understanding of Tongatapu slash Lapaha being the origins, and maybe less on the origin, but as the capital of Polynesia, was this something that was just one person in Lapaha talked about? Was this something everybody understood? Kind of that history. Just what did you understand from your experience in Lapaha on Lapaha being the capital of Polynesia?
No, because I was gonna maybe my follow-up question. I was gonna ask where exactly did her family? Because when she say Apiko Fed in May, because that's also that must be close to Talai Pepe's place, because
Yeah,
I
the
think Pepe's
Taulanga, that's where they had the two, I think the two big stones that they would tie anchor the
eh
Karias to.
eh eh
Because I remember
because I
driving by, Dad said there's a big stone that's like buried, it's upright,
eh
two of them, and they would tie the Karia ropes to hold the
eh
Karia. So I think it's in that area. Oh, the big, like you said, on the Fonuatanu kind of area
yeah.
of the of in La Paja.
Diba?
We're really excited and glad we were able to get part one. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Will publish part two in the near future. My closing thoughts are we're grateful for people like Milika who carry this knowledge and who are willing and able to share it in a way that everyone can benefit from, and really appreciate her and excited for viewers and listeners to get part two as we release it in the near future. Closing thoughts, Mr. Ateroa.
No, I appreciate Mirika Pusiaki for lending her time to join us on this Polynesianized podcast episode. Appreciate her willingness to share, and hopefully, we'll like what you mentioned to get that part two in the near future. Want to thank all of our supporters, viewers, and everyone who has any inclination of just learning, wanting to learn more about our Polynesian history, for supporting us and viewing on the various platforms that this gets to. Appreciate your guys' support. And like what we always leave with everyone through this podcast is to stay curious, ask the hard questions, and be bold.
Yes,
Ofatu,
sir.
to the next one.
Ofatu. Malo.